The topics and opinions expressed on the following show are solely those of the hosts and their guests and not those of W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4WN Radio, its employees, or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4WN Radio.
This is Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. Do you want to live a more fulfilling life? Do you want to live your legacy and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Well, coming up on Divya Parekh's Beyond Confidence, you will hear real stories of leaders, entrepreneurs, and achievers who have stepped into discomfort, shattered their status quo, and are living the life they want. You will learn how relationships are the key to achieving your aspirations and financial goals. Moving your career or business forward does not have to happen at the expense of your personal or family life, or vice versa. Learn more at www.divyaparekh.com, and you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. This is Beyond Confidence, and now here's your host, Divya Parekh.
Good morning. It's Tuesday morning, and I'm so thrilled to be here with you because I love you guys, and without you, the show would not be possible. I want to thank each and every one of you who have supported us by getting our books. And two of my favorite books are The Entrepreneur's Garden and Expert to Influencer. The Entrepreneur's Garden, regardless, wherever you are at, wherever in your life, or an entrepreneur, or in a corporate, it will help you because it helps you build those 9 relationships. For example, relationship with yourself, relationship with money, relationship with results, relationship with time. So that way, it allows you to live the life you deserve and create the impact you want. And now you may be thinking about expert to influencer in the background. And it's not only about building communities. It's not only about getting the likes. It's not only about getting the followers. It's about the impact. Because when you create the impact, you create income as a side effect. So why not have the impact first and income as a secondary effect? And when you purchase our books, not only it's going to help you, we take partial profits from the book sales and help entrepreneurs all across the globe through kiva.org. So it's a win-win situation all around. I invite you to spend 1 hour of your time helping somebody with no strings attached every month. Think about it. Even if 200 million people did that all across the world, it's 200 million hours. What could we achieve in that? We could create so much kindness and joy, so why not do it? So we have something very special for you today, and we are going to bring in our guest now. Welcome, Pitz.
Hi, Divya. Good to be with you. Thanks for the invitation on the show.
Oh, pleasure to have you. So we start out from the childhood. So Pitz, tell us, when you were a child, did you have any moments that left their mark on you and that you remember even today?
That's a great question. And yes, it has to do with music. I'm a musician, and I visited my aunt and uncle's house, and one of my uncles, when I was 3 years old in 1965, one of my uncles was dancing around in his underwear playing air guitar to the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction. And I was a little kid, and I still remember it. It was like, wow. And then he says to me, he's like, Pitz, just listen to the guitar. Listen to that guitar. And I still remember that today. And I was like, wow, music is really powerful. This is my uncle who I love and respect, and he's dancing around in his underwear to the Rolling Stones. And I was like, so music is so powerful. It's like, wow, I need to know more about music, and maybe that's my life path.
And I can definitely relate to that because music transcends everything. If you find a good beat, you may not, you may be sitting with people from 50 different countries. You may not know a single word of their language, and yet you can connect. It brings people together and it brings that joy. And is there something about music that can have so much benefits and impact in our lives? And I cannot play anything, I cannot sing. That said, I do love music, and there's just so much joy. And music is something that's so close and dear to everyone's heart. So as you grew up, what musical instruments were you interested in?
Well, I first played guitar for a little while, and then I played clarinet for a little while, and they really didn't stick with me. But then my dad bought me a drum set for one of my birthdays when I was about 13 and 12 or 13. And the drum set was like, wow, this is what I, here's my home. This is what I should be playing. So I played that for about 10 years, drum kit, and also hand percussion, all kinds of different hand drums and bells and tambourines and whistles and that sort of thing. Just putting the icing on the cake, really. So I kind of got away from the drum set, and then moved on to hand percussion from all over the world, really different instruments.
So what was it about the drums that made you stick with them in comparison to guitar and clarinet?
Yeah, I just felt a connection to it. It's like I'm always tapping my foot or tapping the table with my hand, and sometimes I drove my mom crazy. Like at the dinner table, I was tapping away, and she would just grab my hand and stop me for a few seconds so she can have some peace. But I just felt like it was a natural fit for me, keeping rhythm.
So, there are a lot of people who may be thinking like, okay, so for example, let's say if I want to learn a musical instrument, how can I find out like that connection?
That's that. I think it's easier today because of the internet. You can just search around and check out different instruments. I think maybe it would start with like your favorite type of music, whatever artist or type of music you like. Check out that artist and try to figure out what instruments are within that ensemble, and maybe that's your direction to a starting point.
That's very true. I actually have a single Congo. I'm not sure what it's called, and I have it in the house, and sometimes I will just go and try to look at YouTubes and just kind of, I call it banging, I haven't got much further on it. So, but I do like the sound of it, that deep rhythmic sound, like especially since you mentioned about the drums. What's a good way to bring the motivation in and get going on it?
Get going on a certain instrument?
Yeah.
Well, if the person will know it when they feel it. That's what happened to me with the drums and the didgeridoo eventually. But I think it's a deep feeling inside, and I'm connected to music, and it's just when you feel it, you know it, and it's like, ooh, there it is. The light goes on in your head. It's like, all right, cool. So that's my direction right now. Let's learn more about that.
So you're talking about the connection. It's important to feel the connection. And if you feel the connection, you'll stay with it. So, okay. So like you moved past the drums. What happened next?
Well, going back to my childhood with tapping and keeping rhythm on everything, I was always making sounds, different sounds. I love sound effects on movies and commercials and in different TV shows. So I was making lots of weird sounds with my voice and mouth. And one of my cousins, he used to imitate a trumpet with his mouth, like.
Oh, wow.
He was really good at it. So that got my attention. So I was like, all right, so where am I going with this? Like, I'm not really sure. But when I first heard the didgeridoo in the 1980s, the early 1980s, that's when that sound grabbed me like a magnet and pulled me in, and I knew it right away.
So where did you get exposure to it?
Well, there's a movie called The Coca-Cola Kid that it's in Australia, and also, and then a few years later, the Crocodile Dundee movies
Oh, yeah.
based in Australia, and you hear the didgeridoo underneath all these really cool scenes,
Hmm.
and then I was like, "Oh, what is that thing? I need to know more about it." And then I found out what it is, what it's called, and the internet was not happening then, so I kind of had to do some organic research in the library and talking with friends to find out more about the instrument.
So just kind of veering off the topic, how do you find the difference between when you went to library to figure out things about didgeridoo, learn more about it now when everything is available at fingertips?
Well, it takes more time and more effort. You got to get in the car, drive to the library, or someone has to drop you off there. You got to physically
Mhm.
search for things and research in the card catalog. And then under Australia or didgeridoo, if you even know how to spell that word. So it takes more time. It took more time and more effort then. So,
It took more
versus,
time and more effort.
Mhm.
How did it make you feel once you got the information?
It was great. It was really rewarding. And
Mhm.
then I heard a really cool radio special that featured lots of different types of music with the didgeridoo. So I like, oh, and I was so excited. I called the radio station and I asked them for the set list of those songs and the artist and all their information. And so the guy was really nice. He printed out the playlist for me and sent it to me in snail mail. So about a week later, I got this list of, so all right, cool. I know all these different artists
Mhm.
who feature didgeridoo in their music. Now I have like that was a gold mine of information for me.
Of course. So, like, now you have this gold mine of information. You have all this playlist and different names of different artists. What did you do with it?
Well, then I started looking for music by those artists and going to a record shop. Hey, do you have this? Do you have that? Or maybe I could somehow find a world music catalog and possibly one of those artists is in that catalog and then purchase their music. And a week or so later, it would come in the mail. And then I could really check out and dive into that artist's music.
And when did you buy Didgeridoo and how did you learn it?
Well, here it is. My wife, who we've been together for over 30 years, she's an absolute angel, and she found a world music instrument mail order catalog. So for on Christmas of 1993, I played the didgeridoo for the first time because it was a Christmas present from my wife Amy, and
Oh,
it came from Australia, and it was a really nice little didgeridoo. And the really cool thing about that, it came with an instructional cassette. So, and that was the days of actual cassettes. So that's how long it was ago. But the guy really went into great detail in describing what he was doing. And it really, really helped me get the initial sounds and then just different things you can put on top of the sounds and different techniques, traditional techniques, as well as more modern day avant-garde things. The disadvantage was I couldn't see what he was doing and I couldn't ask him questions. So there was a good amount of technique questions I had that I couldn't ask him that I had to really figure out on my own. And some of those things came to me by accident.
and sometimes discovering those things kind of gives you a deeper understanding.
It does. And again, more rewarding because I had to work to find that information and on my own. So yes, absolutely.
So, how did you become good at it?
Practice, just like any other instrument. You
The
got to put
base.
in, you got to put in the time.
Yeah.
But for me, it really, I didn't view it or it didn't feel like I was working at it, although I was, because I enjoyed it so much. And that's initial drone of the didgeridoo. I heard that and felt locked into it. It's like, I want to make that sound. How do I do that? And it took a while for me to get that sound, but it's practice, practice, practice. And then after playing for 3 years, during that time, I started making instruments. And after that 3 year period, I was pretty good on it. And so then I started going around to craft shows and music festivals in the craft area and making instruments that I offered to the public. So I started selling instruments for 5 years on the craft show circuit. And during the craft show, I'm playing and playing and playing 8 or 10 hours a day and demonstrating, talking about the instrument, asking or answering questions that folks had. So during that 5 year period, I got really good.
So now let's say if somebody was an entrepreneur or in the corporate world, leaders, people, or doesn't matter for that matter, anywhere, whatever they're like, retail person or a person, raising kids, it doesn't matter what they do or what are the few lessons that you learned from this journey?
For that could apply to anyone from the didgeridoo?
Yeah.
Well, the didgeridoo calms you down, whether you're playing it or even listening to it. So that's number one. And if you're playing, you must relax and calm down to get the proper tone. So that's one benefit or lesson that is learned, and we could all use some relaxation and a slower heart rate and a slower breath rate.
Let's explore the lessons that you learned personally that people talk about, like, oh, what are you passionate about? You found that you were passionate about, you didn't have anybody to teach you. What kept you going?
I just, it sounds crazy, but I love the sound of it. Again, going back to my childhood with the different sounds that I was making, and it was also musical sounds. So I had that music connection from when I saw my uncle jumping around playing to the Rolling Stones. So it really, it wasn't an effort at all to keep going because I loved what I was doing.
And you mentioned earlier also that it didn't feel like work. And you found, so basically what you're sharing is that if you know what you love to do, and then it's not work, and then you will find pathways. Like, so for example, you figured out just to learn by the person who is on the cassette without seeing them, and then just being at it, and then becoming a deeper and deeper expert at it, and then also finding a way to make those. So all those didgeridoos that we see behind it, have you made them?
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Thank you.
And so tell us, like, what different types of didgeridoos there are, and like what's the origin, and give us the whole story behind it.
Sure. Well, going back to the traditional didgeridoos in Australia, and let me back up even further. The word didgeridoo is not an Aboriginal term. That word was made up by the first Europeans who showed up in Australia, and they made up a name based on its sound. Onomatopoeia didgeridoo. So
what's matamatopoeia?
Onomatopoeia. It's the technique. It's the process of making up a word based on its sound, like bang.
Okay,
bang,
onomatopoeia.
Yeah, onomatopoeia.
Oh, something new I learned. See, and that's beautiful. Every day you learn something new.
Yeah. So depending on where you are in Australia, the didgeridoo has about 38 to 40 different names that is accepted in the original native communities. And one term that is accepted pretty much nationwide is the word yidaki. That's Yidaki, yidaki. In some areas of Australia, yidaki means short didgeridoo or mosquito didgeridoo. Because the didge is like any other instrument, the shorter ones are going to be higher pitched and brighter, the longer ones deeper, bassier sounding.
So you said about mosquito didgeridoo.
Yeah.
did that come from?
It comes from imitating the sounds. The didgeridoo is a sound effects machine. It's the original sound effects machine. Traditionally, around the fire at nighttime, there's one person telling a story or singing a story, and then there's two or three, sometimes four dancers imitating the movements of what's happening in the story. And then there's one, sometimes two didgeridoo players imitating the sounds of what's happening in the story. Mostly nature sounds, right? So
Right.
whatever is in the story, the didgeridoo player's job is to imitate that sound. And if there's a mosquito, then the didgeridoo player makes the mosquito sound effect. So, and the shorter ones are a little bit easier to make that sound, a little bit more realistic sounding for the mosquito.
Oh, that is so fantastic and phenomenal because think about it. They're putting on a musical every night and it's a part of their culture and just embracing storytelling and music and passing it on to the next generation. So, have you ever done storytelling with didgeridoo?
Well, I have accompanied stories, and so I'm the sound effects person. And sometimes when I go to like a retreat center or a university or some type of presentation, I'll ask someone to read a traditional story and then maybe a not so traditional story. As long as it has all kinds of sounds in it, nature sounds or even man-made sounds in the newer stories. So the answer is yes, I have accompanied those stories, and it's really nice when someone is reading aloud and then the didgeridoo is underneath everything. It's just a really nice pairing of sounds, the human voice and the instrument.
Oh, wow. That is amazing because it. So, are there any specific areas where, like, they use, like, and are these called sound stories?
Well, the oral tradition, like you said, it's passed down from generation to generation. Nothing is really written down except artwork does tell
Mhm.
stories as well. So there's different ways of passing that on.
Oh, that's beautiful. And where can, let's say, people will be definitely interested after listening to the show. If people were interested in getting didgeridoos and learning, how can they go about it?
Well, on my website, there's tons of information. So I have some handcrafted instruments that I've made, and
Mhm.
also if you're looking for an Aboriginal Australia made instrument, I have a link there to a resource in Australia. So yeah, on my website, it's myname.com. That's Pitz Quattrone, PitzQuattrone, pitzquattrone.com, or you can just search by Vermont Didgeridoo or Pitz Didge, So you'll probably find that I'm like the first 100 things that pop up if you plug in just Vermont Didge. So you can find me.
Okay, fantastic. And so they can find you for sure. And then I'm assuming you also teach people how to play.
Yeah, I've been teaching folks how to play since the mid 1990s, and a lot of my stuff now is on video chat. And I've been teaching online for 10 or 12 years, long before COVID. But it's great because now the audio is much better, the cameras are much better. So I have students all over the world, and I teach one-on-one or a group setting, in person or video chat.
Oh, that's fantastic. Pitts, let's maybe demonstrate something. So, how about if I come up with some story and with a nature sound, and can you play along with that? Because that's something when somebody learns, they can do with their families. What do you think of that?
Yes, you mean right now?
Right now?
Okay, I'd love to do that. The with the audio, it may not totally be in sync, but I have some certain settings that I've locked in, and it should be very good.
Okay.
Okay.
And you have to lead me through it where I stop and where the sound comes in. I'm just going to make up the story as we go along because I'm a storyteller storyteller, and I love that. Okay, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. So you want me to go first or you want to start?
Why don't you set the stage, and then I can begin the story.
I like it. Here we go.
That was beautiful. Okay, so Mama and Papa Sparrow are sitting around a fire, and they've got like little, tiny little babies. And let's say they use their beaks like a jackhammer. And now what happens is that when they're opening up the shells, they peck upon the shell and eat the contents. And now sometimes they may be choosing to sit on a gutter. And then the noise becomes very similar to as if somebody's knocking on your front door. Thank you for playing along. I really appreciate that.
Okay.
And
that was cool.
Yeah, so folks, those little Mama and Papa Sparrows, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, we are going to go and you can have stories, and especially with families, and especially if you're out, and especially for family reunions, I can see so many different possibilities because I'm such a storyteller. Let's say if you're on the beach and you just kind of bring in, or even if you're getting together with a group of friends, this can be such a wonderful thing to bring the whole social connections to life, or that social gathering to life. So we have talked about it, and like people can play with it. So tell us, how does it help with health in comparison to any other instruments?
Okay. Well, I touched on it real quickly. In order to play properly in the beginning, you must relax. So that's number one. And there was a really interesting study that came out about 15 years ago, published by the British Medical Journal. And they studied a doctor in Switzerland who found out that playing the didgeridoo, it's a physical instrument. So playing the didgeridoo really works the lower throat muscles, and as well as this technique called circular breathing, which allows the didgeridoo player to play continuously because that person breathes while they play. So using that circular breathing technique, and I can describe that in a minute, all those things really work the internal muscles in your throat that are usually the problem with sleep apnea, obstructive sleep apnea. So it's a really groundbreaking stuff. So the doctor had 25 patients who had sleep apnea, and he brought in a didgeridoo teacher, and that teacher taught the folks how to play, and they played 6 days a week for about a half an hour a day for a 3-month period. So meanwhile, those muscles are getting a serious workout. At the end of that time period, their sleep apnea episodes either totally disappeared or drastically reduced because those muscles are now back in shape and they're nice and straight and strong. They're not flabby and loose and blocking the airway. So this study was published, and a lot of people, it's a really nice alternative to the CPAP machine or other treatments for sleep apnea. So a lot of people come to me and say, Pitz, I just can't stand that CPAP thing. I don't want to get jaw surgery or all these other alignment things. Teach me how to play didgeridoo to help with my sleep apnea.
Oh, that is so fantastic, because, without sleep, it's the day can be so tough. So that's Phenomenal. So tell us about circular breathing.
Okay, circular breathing. So, and to get the initial sound on the didgeridoo, I'm flapping my lips. Nice and loose and wide open, not tight and pressured like a trumpet player, very loose, kind of like what a tuba player does.
So is that how you played didgeridoo?
That's how you get started, yeah.
Ah,
That's step one is you flap your lips and it resonates down the didgeridoo and it eventually creates that initial drone. So that drone is your foundation of sound. So I'm playing along. Eventually I'm going to need air for my lungs, right?
and if you remember, like when we were children, we used to do that sound.
Yes, that's a great point because when I go to schools and teach kids how to play, almost every kid is a natural didgeridoo player. That's what I found. And it's so cool because, I guess as people get older and older, they stop doing that or the adults kind of like, oh, I can't do that. I'll look silly. But forget all that.
And usually it used to happen when some kid did not like some other kid and what they're saying, and they would just go.
Yeah, right. Or it's the raspberry thing.
Or it's the raspberry thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you get started on the didge. So I'm playing. Eventually I'm going to need air to breathe. So what I do is on its way out, I catch some air in my cheeks. And with my cheek muscles alone, I squeeze in one mouthful at a time. So that's forcing the air out of my mouth. So I'm not actually breathing out. I'm just emptying my mouth chamber with the cheeks. And that little puff keeps my lips flapping for just a second or so. That's my opportunity to breathe up my nose for my lungs. And I'll do it 2 or 3, maybe 4 times in a row while I'm playing because it's just a little bit of air. So here it is. I'm playing, right?
Yeah.
Get some air in my cheeks. And with my cheek muscles alone, force it out and breathe up my nose at the same time. So that motion, that's the circle. That's where the name comes from.
I see. And it's if you kind of like break it apart, like from didgeridoo playing, it's such a good way of breathing where you're pulling in more air and you're building your muscles. Oh, that's amazing.
Absolutely. Any amount, I'm totally convinced any amount of didgeridoo playing is beneficial health-wise. But once you start doing the circular breathing, it catapults. The benefits like expand, amplify to great amounts. And that's what really, really helps with getting those muscles, internal workout. It's like a push-ups for those muscles. And it gets them back into shape so they're no longer obstructing the airway.
Oh, I see. So because they're not in shape, they obstruct the airway, and that's why people have sleep apnea.
Yes, that's what this has all been described to me from medical professionals. I'm a musician. I'm not a doctor or a healthcare professional, but I've seen it in all my students. Even if one thing I start with right away, day one with my students, someone comes to me, a new student, it's like, okay, flap your lips like that.
And that's so much fun. You get to do it officially.
It is. It's a fun thing. And what I do ask the folks is like, okay, do that and then time yourself and see how long that lasts. And there's no right or wrong answer, whether it's 8 seconds, 15 seconds, doesn't matter. But write that down, like, okay, day one, I went for 15 seconds. And then I asked folks to play every day and practice 15, 20, 30 minutes. And at the end of the first week, do that same exercise of timing your breath. Every time that breath is longer. So
it's practice.
The benefits start happening right away. And this person's not even circular breathing yet. So they're getting warmed up, building up capacity, opening up the airways, and that's only a good thing. Yeah,
and here's the beauty of it, that you're enjoying
There it is again.
Yep. Well, your family members may be like, okay, what is that sound you're making or noise?
Yeah. Yeah. So, but the better you get at the instrument, the better and better the tone and your technique gets. So hopefully your family members won't mind too much after
Of course not. Of course not.
a few days or a couple of weeks.
It can be such a great exercise where you're learning it with your child.
Yes, absolutely. That I love that idea. That's a really good thing. And so the parents doing it, then the children imitates that technique and that sound, and it's fun for them, and it's also healthy for both people.
It's a great way to bond with anyone for that matter. And so you mentioned about like, you gave us the example of one sound, like how it comes out. Like, so do different didgeridoos make different sounds?
Different tones. Again,
Different tones.
it's a musical instrument. The long ones are bassy, short ones are higher.
So would you be open to sharing with us how does a short one sound?
Yeah, well, the one I played was rather short, but I can play this other one here. This one is really long. It probably won't fit the whole thing in the camera, but I'll play here.
Wow. So that's just amazing. So what is the science behind about the sound? Like, is it like a tunnel? That would love to learn about that.
Yeah, structurally, the instrument is a tunnel. It's a long, hollowed out tree branch. And how these are made traditionally for thousands of years, and a lot of people agree, a lot of music experts agree, the didgeridoo is the world's oldest musical instrument. No one really knows how old, between 1500, perhaps up to 40,000 years. So how the traditional instruments are made is there's termites that eat out the center of a tree limb.
Interesting.
Yes. So when the instrument maker needs to make an instrument, they'll go around and look for a termite mound, and different types of eucalyptus trees are around. So if there's a termite mound and a eucalyptus tree close by, chances are those termites have done their work. So the termites go underground and they eat their way up the trunk and out the branches of the tree. And the didge maker will go around and knock on that branch. He'll look for the termite and the tree nearby and then start knocking on different branches to hear how hollow it is. And through experience, that person will know, like, okay, this one's ready to go. This one's needs some more time, or this one might be too far gone. So if it's ready to go, then the didge maker will cut that branch down and take it back home, and sometimes peel the bark off, let it season, and then decorate it. Or sometimes the bark is left on for a nice natural look.
And is that how you get your wood as well?
No, I don't want to attract any termites to my house.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking, that
Yeah.
it's one thing to kind of get it, but with termites inside it, how does that work?
Yeah. So what I do, I found this really interesting tree. It's called Paulownia, or princess tree is a nickname for it. It's a softwood. It's an invasive species from Asia, but it grows all over the world now. And the really many different aspects that's really helpful for me is the first 2 to 3 years of its life, it grows mostly hollow. So, yeah, so there's a little pithy area where the branches come out, intersection, but in between those branches, it's a hollow tunnel. So I have a really long drill bit, and what I've learned how to go in one end very carefully so it doesn't blow out the side, and let that tunnel guide me, and then I'll flip the instrument around and then approach it from the other direction to complete that tunnel.
Wow, that's so interesting. And where do you find your princess trees?
Well, I live in Vermont, and they do grow here, although it's a little bit cold for them. So, but in the United States, all around southern New England and throughout the mid-Atlantic, especially down in like New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, DC, and even further south, it grows to a full-blown tree. So I have different places that folks let me harvest in Vermont. It grows in 1 year, it grows to full height, and then the stalk dies, the root ball stays alive, and next year it shoots out a new set of branches.
Oh, what a fascinating story about that. So thank you for coming on our show and sharing.
You're welcome.
If,
Thanks.
If you
Thanks
were to give the last top 2 to 3 tips to our listeners, what might that be?
Well, another thing I'd like to do is I'm a musician, so I create music. I put the didgeridoo in a lot of different musical settings, including my own like rock, funk, really fun stuff. But this instrument has taken me around the world collaborating with different musicians. So I really believe that the didgeridoo is a very versatile instrument musically. So I put it in all kinds of different settings. I'm not an Aboriginal from Australia, and I don't pretend to be. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so that's my musical background. So I played this really old instrument in my musical background and also with backgrounds from all over the world.
Well, that's awesome, because what you're doing is you're pulling everything together, and that's what needs to happen. And that's what brings us together as people. When we embrace and adapt to different cultures and make it mainstream. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. And make it accessible. And like you said earlier, music transcends all boundaries. And even if I can't speak to a person in West Africa, their language, they can't speak mine. They're a fabulous musician. We get together and we can communicate with music, and we look over and smile at each other, and yeah, this is working. So it's the great communicator, and this instrument, I owe a lot to it. It's really opened up a whole world for me, and in turn, life missions and a successful, rewarding career.
Well, Pitz, thank you so much for playing for us and playing along for the story. Now, where can they again find you? If you can share with us your website, your link, and how you teach them, just full details.
Yeah, well, if you want to hear music, just ask your smart speaker to play Pitz Quattrone, and I'm on every musical platform that there is. And if you want to find me online, check out my website with all those different options you just described. It's pitzquattrone.com. Again, it's PITZQUATTRONE, pitzquattrone.com, or just search for Pitz, P-I-T-Z, Didge, D-I-D-G-E.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and doing what you're doing, because as you mentioned, sleep is such an important part, and this is a natural way to get rid of it. And so thank you again.
You're welcome, Divya. Thank you for inviting me on the show. It's been my pleasure.
Absolutely. It's been a joy speaking to you. And listeners, thank you for joining us, because without you, the show would not be possible. You are the soul of this show. So reach out to us. Let us know, how can we support you, and how can we help you live the life you deserve with joy, wealth, health, and happiness. And thank you, Juan, for making the show possible. So folks, be well and take care until next time.
Thank you for being part of Beyond Confidence with your host, Divya Parekh. We hope you have learned more about how to start living the life you want. Each week on Beyond Confidence, you hear stories of real people who have experienced growth by overcoming their fears and building meaningful relationships. During Beyond Confidence, Divya Parekh shares what happened to her when she stepped out of her comfort zone to work directly with people across the globe. She not only coaches people how to form heart connections, but also transform relationships to mutually beneficial partnerships as they strive to live the life they want. If you are ready to live the life you want and leverage your strengths, learn more at www.divyaparekh.com. And you can connect with Divya at contact@divyaparekh.com. We look forward to you joining us next week.